Today's discussion largely looks at the Digimon scene in regards to fan favorites. Interestingly, when you ask yourself what are the decks that are most represented from each season from the anime, you widely get mixed answers. Take Adventure 1 for example, that largely gave each Digidestined some screen time, with the villain of the week before making it more of the adventures of Tai and Matt. Throughout the Digimon card game's history, Greymon and Garurumon decks have always been in the meta in some way, shape, or form. But now when you look at BT17's meta, neither of these decks no longer sees any tops, at least in Japan's format. One quick segue I do want to make is that our North American BT17 format is likely not going to be able to utilize any data from DigimonMeta.com when it comes to looking at results. I'll hammer this message home at every chance I get in that Japan's format is best of 1, while ours is best of 3. Those one-off decks that can high roll one game lose the surprise factor when going into games 2 and 3. But this isn't the only aspect specifically for BT17, because in Japan's BT17 format, they had access to scramble option cards, and even some of the newer Ace Digimon. Frankly, because of these changes, I anticipate the format to be largely dominated by Numemon, Ancient Garurumon, Magnamon X, and Imperial Dramon. Not saying that these will be the only decks you'll see, but with some tournament results I've seen, Numemon tends to take up almost 20% of entries, Magnamon X about 10%, and Imperial Dramon 5 to 6. And I'm not even including other meta contenders like Mirage Gabumon, who is still popular to this day. Hilariously, I found one Greymon list that topped in Japan during this time period, and when I checked it out, surprise surprise, I found Scramble option cards and Agumon Bond of Bravery Ace. When researching for Garurumon during this period, again, I didn't find anything unless you're talking about Ancient Garurumon. And the big question for this video is why? Why is Greymon and Garurumon not doing so well in the competitive scene, and what would help make the deck better? For the first 2 years in Digimon, there was largely no protection tied with Digimon cards themselves. Protection typically came in the form of an option card that had to be played in order to give your Digimon some form of immunity, which in the early days was simply DP reduction. Fast forward to BT9, and this set would introduce a wide variety of effects that would instantly begin the cycle of building up the many layers of protection we see on Digimon to this day. With Garurumon you had battle protection, and with Greymon you had protection from bounce or deletion. But even so, the Digimon card game has evolved to a point in which deck strategies of the past no longer has any relevance to today's meta. The main one that I'm talking about, of course, being the Raise meta. The Raise meta was one major complaint players had, due to players typically leaving their Digimon in the back, where effects could not target it, until they promoted it up and would wombo combo their opponent's security in one turn. It was a common practice to see decks like wargreymon, metalgarurumon X, Justmon, Alphamon, and more commit to a single promote and destroy their opponent with one big swing, or multiple swings that ended with Blitz Omnimon. To this day, there's really only one deck that I still see topping consistently that I would categorize as this type of deck, and it's Mirage Gabumon. But there's one major difference with this deck in that your deck typically doesn't streamline you in all Gaomon or Galgamon Digimon. Instead, at times, you may be utilizing the Betamon or Biomon in the level 3 category, and even Zudomon Ace in the level 5s, which can not only strip your opponent's sources and bounce their Digimon, but also climb closer to your Mirage Gabumon play on your turn. Mirage Gabumon in my mind is also one of the few tower-based decks that is also extremely memory efficient because it punishes your opponent when it comes to drawing or adding cards via effects for consistency. When you look at Greymon or Garurumon decks, that's one major issue with the deck in that you're always running the same level 3s, 4s, and 5s in order to be as consistent as possible. And frankly, the Ace variants of these Digimon suck. Don't get me wrong, metalgarurumon Ace at the time of release was a fantastic way to steal turns, then delete their Digimon when attacking. Weregarurumon Ace is also pretty decent when it comes to stunning the board. But when you look at the cards printed for metalgreymon Ace and wargreymon Ace, garbage. Fast forward to Ace Digimon to today, and there's just absolutely no comparison. Interestingly, when you look at memory efficient elements of both of these decks, Garurumon decks are also just better in that they have access to ways to gain memory via card effects, and are typically based in blue and purple. Greymon decks, whether you're red or black, don't really have this. At this point, the only negative aspect about Garurumon decks is that they only have battle protection, not pseudo effects like other blue decks that can armor purge, partition, and place cards from your opponent's security into the hand while also unsuspending. Battle Protection is just jamming with extra steps. Besides memory efficiency, Protection is simply dated for what it used to do. Don't get me wrong again, it was very powerful for its time, but pushing the deck to consistently set aside 4 slots for its level 3s, 4s, and 5s for the extra X evolution really pigeonholed it into one deck with slight adjustments to the top line. When you look at decks like ImperialDramon, yes, you're running the same level 3s and 4s for the most part, but over time the deck has gotten more flexible with its top end and for some even utilized degenerate cards like Magnamon X. Magnamon X and Partition, what a meme. Frankly, the only thing that Greymon has going for it when compared to Garurumon is that while it does have protection from bounce, deletion, and DP reduction, it also has pseudo-floating capability, but even then, the floating element is outclassed by decks such as Numemon. After BT13, a new dev team started working on future sets. Whether you want to call this time period a soft reboot, admittedly a lot of Digimon have lost their dual-color identity since BT13, as this was the last set that featured dual-color agumons that were either red and black support for Tai, or red and yellow for Marcus. BT14 returned to your standard red agumon and is further emphasized in BT17, in which Tai's agumon is simply red, and Marcus's agumon is simply yellow. One could argue that BT16 brought back a return of dual-colored cards, but my honest opinion of the lower end of most cards is them trying to make the new cards work with the old ones. Frankly, I wasn't a fan of it. But with BT17, this is where the return of agumons as solely red and yellow cards creates more hindrance to the deck at times. Remember, with established lines in black, red, and yellow, the large problem with Greymon as an overall archetype is that the newest one has no color coordination. As a white Digimon, this is now another color in the Greymon family to contend with. When training options were first introduced, this was one of the best means of creating consistency and future plays for a deck. But because Greymon is so spread out in what is amongst its best level 2s, 3s, 4s, and even 5s, frankly, it makes it very difficult to cohesively build the deck with consistency and speed. In tinkering with some early editions of the newest Greymon deck, I found a lot of wild combos that are really fun to do. But generally, what are your thoughts on Greymon and Garurumon as deck choices at this point? What are they missing to make them meta contenders again? And would you like to see them return once again to the fold of top tier decks? Let me know your thoughts as I dive into some interesting interactions with BT17, and I'll catch you next time. This is DIGI-PANDA, logging out.